The leather-bound book hit the stone floor with a sickening crack, its spine splitting open like a wounded bird, as Lady Cordelia Blackthorne's perfectly manicured hand delivered the blow that shattered not just binding and pages, but Rosalind's heart. "Foolish Ignoramus," her stepmother shrieked, her voice echoing through the grand library of Thornfield Manor like a curse. "How dare you touch my late husband's precious books with your grubby peasant hands?" Rosalind dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the scattered pages of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the same book her beloved father had read to her every night before his death 3 years ago. Tears blurred her vision as she tried to piece together the torn fragments, each ripped page feeling like another piece of her soul being destroyed. "I was only reading, my lady," Rosalind whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the fireplace. "Father always said the library was—" "Your father is dead." Lady Cordelia's silk skirts rustled like serpent scales as she stepped closer, her heel deliberately crushing one of the loose pages. "And his ridiculous indulgence of your unnatural obsession with books died with him. No respectable man wants a wife who thinks herself cleverer than he is." Rosalind's fingers trembled as she salvaged what she could of the ruined book, pressing the damaged pages against her chest like a shield. At 19, she'd already learned that in Lady Cordelia's world, a woman's worth was measured by her beauty, her dowry, and her ability to remain silent and ornamental. Intelligence was not just unwelcome, it was dangerous. "Look at you," Lady Cordelia continued, her voice dripping with disgust as she surveyed Rosalind's simple brown dress and ink-stained fingers. "Covered in dust and smudges like a common scullery maid. My daughters would never debase themselves with such vulgar pursuits." As if summoned by their mother's words, Rosalind's 2 stepsisters appeared in the library doorway like matching porcelain dolls, beautiful, empty, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. "Oh, Mamma," giggled Arabella, the elder at 21, her golden ringlets bouncing as she shook her head in mock dismay. "You've caught the little bookworm in her natural habitat again. Honestly, Rosalind," added Vivienne, 18 and equally vapid, "don't you know that reading gives women wrinkles? All that squinting at tiny letters will ruin your complexion, though I suppose it hardly matters in your case." Rosalind bit back the sharp retort that burned on her tongue. She had learned through painful experience that defending herself only made things worse. Instead, she clutched the damaged book tighter and tried to make herself invisible against the towering mahogany shelves that had once been her sanctuary. "From now on," Lady Cordelia declared, her voice carrying the finality of a judge's sentence, "this library is forbidden to you. These books belong to a gentleman of learning, not some base-born girl who fancies herself a scholar." "But father left them to me," Rosalind protested, the words escaping before she could stop them. "In his will, he specifically said—" The slap came so fast that Rosalind didn't see it coming. Her cheek burned with the impact, and she tasted blood where her teeth cut her inner lip. "Your father was clearly not in his right mind when he wrote that will," Lady Cordelia said coldly, flexing her fingers as if the slap had been more painful for her than for Rosalind. "A dying man's fevered fantasies have no bearing on reality. These books, like everything else in this house, belong to me now. Actually, Mother," Arabella said with the cruel smile she'd perfected since childhood, "I think we should let her keep one book, something appropriate for her station." "Oh, yes!" Vivienne clapped her hands together in delight. "What about that cookbook in the kitchen, the one with all the grease stains? That's much more suitable for someone of her intellectual capacity." Their laughter rang through the library like breaking glass, each note designed to cut deeper than the last. Rosalind closed her eyes and tried to remember her father's voice reading to her from these very shelves, tried to hold on to the memory of feeling loved and valued and worthy of knowledge. "You have 1 hour to remove yourself from this room," Lady Cordelia announced. "And if I catch you in here again, you'll find yourself sleeping in the stables with the other animals." As her step-family swept from the library, in a rustle of silk and malice, Rosalind remained on her knees among the scattered pages, feeling as broken as the book in her hands. The silence that followed their departure was deafening, filled only with the ticking of the grandfather clock and the whisper of her own ragged breathing. She had lost everything, her father, her home, her identity, and now the one thing that had kept her sane through 3 years of abuse and humiliation. The books had been her escape, her education, her connection to a world beyond the suffocating confines of Thornfield Manor. Without them, she was truly alone. "Miss Rosalind," the gentle voice made her look up through her tears. Mrs. Hartwell, the elderly housekeeper who had served the family since before Rosalind was born, stood in the doorway with the expression of deep sympathy. "Oh, my dear child," Mrs. Hartwell whispered, hurrying forward to help Rosalind to her feet. "I heard the shouting. Are you hurt?" "Only my pride." Rosalind lied, though her cheek still throbbed from the slap, "and my heart." Mrs. Hartwell's weathered hands were gentle as she took the damaged book from Rosalind's trembling fingers. "I remember when your dear father read this to you. You couldn't have been more than 6 years old, but you hung on every word as if it were pure gold. He said knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take away from me," Rosalind said bitterly. "He was wrong." "Was he?" Mrs. Hartwell's eyes twinkled with something that might have been mischief. "Tell me, child, what have you learned from all those books you've read over the years?" "Everything," Rosalind said without hesitation. "History, literature, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, languages, French, Latin, even some Greek. I've read about far-off lands and ancient civilizations, about great love stories and terrible tragedies. I've learned about art and music and—" She stopped, realizing how her voice had grown stronger with each word. "And where is all that knowledge now?" Mrs. Hartwell asked softly. Rosalind touched her temple with wonder. "In here. In my mind. They can take away the books, but they can't take away what I've already learned." "Exactly. Your father was a wise man, Miss Rosalind. He knew that true education lives in the heart and mind, not on a shelf." Mrs. Hartwell glanced around the library with a conspiratorial air. "Besides, who's to say you can't continue your education elsewhere?" "What do you mean?" "The village has a small lending library above the apothecary shop. Old Mr. Whitmore is always happy to discuss books with someone who truly appreciates them. And there's a traveling scholar who stops at the inn every few months, Professor Blackwood. He's always looking for intelligent conversation." Hope flickered in Rosalind's chest like a candle flame in the wind. "You think they would welcome someone like me?" "Someone like you?" Mrs. Hartwell smiled. "My dear, you're the most well-read young woman in 3 counties. Any scholar worth his salt would be delighted to meet you." "But Lady Cordelia—" "Need never know. You do the marketing for the household, don't you? Who's to say you can't take a longer route through the village? Who's to say you can't strike up conversations with the local merchants?" For the first time in hours, Rosalind felt something other than despair. It wouldn't be the same as having her father's magnificent library at her disposal, but it would be something. A way to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep the flame of her intellectual curiosity alive, despite her stepfamily's attempts to extinguish it. "Thank you," she whispered, impulsively hugging the older woman. "Thank you for reminding me that there's still hope." "There's always hope, child. Sometimes we just have to look a little harder to find it." That evening, as Rosalind served dinner to her stepfamily in the grand dining room, she kept her eyes downcast and her expression carefully neutral. But inside, her mind was racing with plans. Tomorrow was market day, which meant she would have a legitimate reason to go into the village. She could visit the lending library, perhaps even meet this Professor Blackwood that Mrs. Hartwell had mentioned. "Rosalind," Lady Cordelia's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "You're daydreaming again. How many times must I tell you that a servant should be attentive to her duties?" "I'm sorry, my lady," Rosalind murmured, refilling Arabella's wineglass with steady hands. "Really, Mother," Arabella said with a theatrical sigh, "I don't know why we keep her around. She's so terribly dull and she makes the most dreadful conversation. Lord Pemberton was asking about her at the Ashworth ball last week. Apparently he's looking for a wife, and I simply didn't know what to say." "Lord Pemberton?" Vivian wrinkled her nose in distaste. "But he's ancient. He must be at least 40, and I heard he's already buried 2 wives." "Which makes him experienced," Lady Cordelia said pragmatically, "and wealthy. His estates border ours, which would be quite convenient. Besides, what else is Rosalind good for? She's plain, she has no dowry to speak of, and her obsession with books makes her completely unsuitable for polite society." Rosalind's hands trembled slightly as she set down the wine decanter, but she forced herself to remain silent. She had heard this conversation before. her step-family's casual discussions of her future, as if she were a piece of furniture to be sold to the highest bidder. "I suppose she could manage Lord Pemberton," Arabella mused. "He's half-blind anyway, so her looks wouldn't matter. And if she keeps her mouth shut about all that nonsense she reads, he might not notice how peculiar she is." "It's settled then," Lady Cordelia declared. "I'll write to Lord Pemberton tomorrow and arrange a meeting. The sooner we get Rosalind off our hands, the better." As Rosalind cleared the dishes with mechanical precision, her mind reeled with the implications of what she'd just heard. Lord Pemberton was notorious throughout the county for his cruelty to his servants and his previous wives. Marrying him would be a death sentence, if not literally, then certainly spiritually. She had to escape. Somehow, some way, she had to find a path out of this nightmare before it was too late. Later that night, alone in her small attic room, Rosalind sat by the single candle and tried to formulate a plan. She had no money, no family to turn to, and no skills that would allow her to support herself independently. In her step-family's eyes, she was nothing more than an unwanted burden to be disposed of as quickly and cheaply as possible. But she had her mind, she had her education. She had knowledge that most women of her station could never dream of possessing. Surely that had to count for something. A soft knock at her door interrupted her brooding. "Come in," she called softly. Mrs. Hartwell entered, carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I thought you might like this," she said, pressing the package into Rosalind's hands. Inside was a book, not one of her father's precious volumes, but a small, well-worn copy of sonnets by Shakespeare. The pages were yellowed with age and the binding was cracked, but it was beautiful to Rosalind's starved eyes. "Where did you get this?" she asked in wonder. "It belonged to my late husband. He was a schoolmaster before he died, and he always said that poetry was food for the soul." Mrs. Hartwell's eyes were kind but sad. "I heard what Lady Cordelia said at dinner about Lord Pemberton. I thought you might need some comfort." Rosalind clutched the book to her chest, feeling tears threaten again. "I can't marry him, Mrs. Hartwell. I'd rather die than spend my life with that horrible man." "Then don't," the housekeeper said simply. "What choice do I have? I have nowhere to go, no way to support myself." "You have more choices than you realize, child. But sometimes we have to be brave enough to take them." Mrs. Hartwell moved to the small window that looked out over the manor's grounds. "There's a world beyond Thornfield, Miss Rosalind, a world where intelligence is valued, where a woman can make her own way if she's clever enough and determined enough." "You make it sound so simple." "I didn't say it would be simple. I said it was possible." Mrs. Hartwell turned back to face her. "Your father left you more than just books, you know. He left you a mind capable of great things. Don't let them convince you that it's worthless." After the housekeeper left, Rosalind opened the book of sonnets and began to read by candlelight. The familiar rhythm of Shakespeare's words soothed her frayed nerves and reminded her of who she truly was, beneath the layers of abuse and humiliation. She was Rosalind Ashford, daughter of a scholar and gentleman. She was educated, intelligent, and capable of so much more than her step-family could imagine. She would not be sold off to a cruel old man like a piece of livestock. She would find a way to escape, to build a life worthy of her father's memory and her own dreams. The next morning dawned grey and drizzly, matching Rosalind's mood as she prepared for her trip to the village market. She dressed in her plainest gown and wrapped a worn cloak around her shoulders, trying to look as unremarkable as possible. The last thing she needed was to attract unwanted attention. "Don't dawdle in the village," Lady Cordelia instructed as Rosalind prepared to leave. "I expect you back before noon, and make sure you get a good price on the vegetables. Money doesn't grow on trees, despite what your father may have led you to believe." "Yes, my lady," Rosalind replied meekly, though inside she was burning with resentment. The walk to the village took nearly an hour, but Rosalind didn't mind. It was the only time she was truly free, when she could walk at her own pace and think her own thoughts without fear of criticism or punishment. The countryside was beautiful, even in the grey morning light, with rolling hills and ancient oak trees that had stood for centuries. As she entered the village proper, Rosalind felt her spirits lift slightly. Here, among the bustling market stalls and cheerful shopkeepers, she was just another young woman going about her daily business. No one knew about her stepfamily's cruelty or her own desperate circumstances. She completed her marketing quickly and efficiently, then made her way to the apothecary shop that Mrs. Hartwell had mentioned. A narrow staircase at the side of the building led to a small sign that read, "Whitmore's Lending Library, Scholars Welcome." Rosalind's heart pounded as she climbed the stairs. What if Mr. Whitmore didn't want to see her? What if he thought she was presumptuous for coming? What if— "Good morning, my dear," said a kindly voice as she reached the top of the stairs. "You must be Miss Ashford. Mrs. Hartwell told me you might be paying us a visit." The man who greeted her was elderly but spry, with twinkling blue eyes and a white beard that made him look like a benevolent wizard. The room behind him was small, but crammed floor to ceiling with books, creating a cozy cave of knowledge that made Rosalind's heart sing. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked tentatively. "Indeed. And you, my dear, are the young lady who's read her way through Lord Ashford's entire library, if Mrs. Hartwell is to be believed. Quite an accomplishment for someone so young." "You knew my father?" "Oh yes, we corresponded frequently about various scholarly matters. He was quite proud of your intellectual development." Mr. Whitmore's expression grew sad. "Such a tragedy when we lost him. The world needs more men like your father, men who understand that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded." Rosalind felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." Come in. Mr. Whitmore ushered her into the library with obvious enthusiasm. "Tell me, what are your particular areas of interest? History, literature, philosophy? I have a wonderful collection of medieval manuscripts that might intrigue you." For the next hour, Rosalind lost herself in paradise. Mr. Whitmore was everything she had hoped for, knowledgeable, passionate about learning, and delighted to have found someone who shared his love of books. They discussed everything from Aristotle to Chaucer, from ancient history to modern poetry. "You have a remarkable mind, my dear," Mr. Whitmore said as their conversation began to wind down. "Your father trained you well. Have you ever considered teaching? There's a great need for educated women in the larger cities, governesses, companions, even teachers in some of the more progressive schools." "I've thought about it," Rosalind admitted, "but I have no references, no connections, no way to prove my qualifications." "Ah, but you do have qualifications. You have knowledge, which is worth more than any piece of paper." Mr. Whitmore stroked his beard thoughtfully. "As it happens, I have a friend in London, a lady who runs a school for young women. She's always looking for qualified teachers, and she cares more about ability than pedigree." Rosalind's heart leaped with hope. "Do you really think she might consider me? I think she'd be delighted to meet you. But first you'd need to get to London, which requires funds and planning." Mr. Whitmore's expression grew serious. "Is your situation at home truly as difficult as Mrs. Hartwell suggested?" "Worse," Rosalind said quietly. "They want to marry me off to Lord Pemberton." Mr. Whitmore's face darkened. "That man is a monster. I wouldn't wish him on my worst enemy, let alone a bright young woman like yourself." "Then you understand why I need to find another path?" "Indeed I do. Let me think about this, my dear. Perhaps there's something we can arrange." Mr. Whitmore moved to his desk and began shuffling through papers. "In the meantime, please consider this library your second home. Come whenever you can, read whatever interests you, and don't let anyone convince you that your love of learning is anything less than a gift." As Rosalind made her way back to Thornfield Manor, her mind was spinning with possibilities. For the first time in years, she felt as though she had allies, people who valued her mind and wanted to help her succeed. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The afternoon passed in a blur of household chores and her stepfamily's usual complaints. But that evening, as she served dinner once again, Rosalind noticed something different. Lady Cordelia kept glancing at her with a calculating expression, and both Arabella and Vivian seemed unusually excited about something. "Rosalind," Lady Cordelia said as the meal was ending, "Lord Pemberton will be calling tomorrow afternoon. You will make yourself presentable and conduct yourself with proper decorum. This is your chance to secure a respectable marriage, and I won't have you ruining it with your peculiar ways." Rosalind's blood turned to ice. "Tomorrow?" "Yes, tomorrow. He's quite eager to meet you, especially after I assured him that you're a quiet, obedient girl who would make a suitable wife for a man of his standing." "But I'm not ready." "Ready for what? You're 19 years old, well past the age when most girls marry. You should be grateful that any man is willing to take you, given your circumstances." That night, Rosalind lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with desperate plans. She could run away. But where would she go with no money and no resources? She could refuse to marry Lord Pemberton, but that would only result in more punishment and abuse. She could try to contact Mr. Whitmore's friend in London, but that would take time she didn't have. As dawn broke over Thornfield Manor, Rosalind realized that she was trapped. Tomorrow Lord Pemberton would arrive, and her step-family would do everything in their power to ensure that she became his wife. Her dreams of education and independence would die, crushed beneath the weight of a loveless marriage to a cruel man. But as she dressed for what might be her last day of freedom, Rosalind made herself a promise. Whatever happened, she would not go quietly. She would not let them break her spirit or destroy her love of learning. She would find a way to survive, to keep the flame of knowledge burning in her heart, no matter what the cost. She had no idea that her salvation was already on its way, traveling through the night in an elegant black carriage, pulled by 4 magnificent horses, carrying a passenger whose very existence would change her life forever. The vampire prince was coming to Thornfield Manor, and nothing would ever be the same again. The black carriage appeared on the horizon just as the church bells chimed 3 o'clock, moving with an otherworldly grace that seemed to defy the muddy country roads. Rosalind watched from her attic window as it approached Thornfield Manor, her heart sinking with each turn of its wheels. Lord Pemberton had arrived, and with him, her doom. But as the carriage drew closer, she frowned in confusion. This was not the gaudy, ostentatious vehicle she had expected from a man like Pemberton. This carriage was elegant and understated, its black lacquer gleaming like obsidian in the afternoon light. The horses were magnificent creatures that moved with perfect synchronization, and the driver sat with the straight-backed posture of a military man. "Rosalind!" Lady Cordelia's voice shrieked from below. "Come down this instant. Lord Pemberton has arrived." But as Rosalind hurried down the narrow servants' stairs, she could hear confusion in the voices drifting from the main hall. Lady Cordelia was speaking in the overly sweet tone she reserved for important guests, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty that made Rosalind pause at the bottom of the stairs. "Your Grace," Lady Cordelia was saying, "I'm afraid there must be some mistake. We were expecting Lord Pemberton this afternoon." "There is no mistake, madam," replied a voice that made Rosalind's breath catch in her throat. It was deep and cultured, with an accent that spoke of old money and older bloodlines. "I am Prince Adrian Dracul, and I have come to call upon Miss Rosalind Ashford." Rosalind pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding. A prince? Here, asking for her? It was impossible. "Miss Ashford," Lady Cordelia's voice had risen to an almost comical pitch, "but surely your Grace means one of my daughters, Arabella or Vivienne. They are both accomplished young ladies of excellent breeding." "I mean Miss Rosalind Ashford, daughter of the late Lord Ashford," the prince said firmly. "I believe she resides in this household." "Well, yes, but she's not." "Your Grace, perhaps you would prefer to meet my daughters first. They are both available and would be delighted to make your acquaintance." Rosalind could practically hear her stepmother's mind racing, trying to figure out how to substitute one of her own daughters for the unwanted stepdaughter. But the prince's next words cut through her, scheming like a blade. "Madam, I have not come here by accident or on a whim. I have traveled a considerable distance specifically to meet Miss Rosalind Ashford, and I will not be deterred by your attempts at misdirection. Now will you summon her, or must I search the house myself?" The threat in his voice was subtle but unmistakable, and Rosalind heard Lady Cordelia's sharp intake of breath. Whoever this Prince Adrian was, he was not a man to be trifled with. "Of course, Your Grace," Lady Cordelia said quickly. "Rosalind, come here immediately." Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, Rosalind stepped into the main hall. The sight that greeted her nearly stopped her heart. The man standing in the center of the room was unlike anyone she had ever seen. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that seemed to absorb the light around it, and skin so pale it was almost luminous. He wore an impeccably tailored black coat that emphasized his aristocratic bearing. And when he turned to look at her, his eyes were the most unusual shade of silver she had ever encountered. But it was more than his physical appearance that took her breath away. There was something otherworldly about him, an aura of power and danger that made the very air seem to thrum with energy. He moved with fluid grace, and when he smiled, she caught a glimpse of teeth that were just a little too sharp to be entirely human. "Miss Ashford," he said, bowing with old-world courtesy, "I am Prince Adrian Dracul. It is a pleasure to finally meet you." Rosalind dropped into a curtsy, her mind reeling with questions. "Your Grace, I'm honored, but I'm afraid I don't understand. Why have you come to see me?" "Because, my dear Miss Ashford, you have something that interests me greatly." His silver eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Your reputation as a scholar has reached even my remote corner of the world." "My reputation?" Rosalind glanced nervously at her stepfamily, who were watching this exchange with expressions of shock and growing avarice. "Indeed. I am told that you have read extensively in classical literature, history and philosophy, that you speak multiple languages and have a particular interest in medieval manuscripts. Is this accurate?" "Yes, Your Grace, but I don't see how—" "Your Grace," Lady Cordelia interrupted, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Surely you've been misinformed. Rosalind is a simple girl with no formal education. My daughters, on the other hand, have been trained by the finest tutors." "Have they read Aristotle's Metaphysics in the original Greek?" Prince Adrian asked mildly, his silver eyes never leaving Rosalind's face. "Well, no, but can they discuss the political implications of Machiavelli's The Prince? Have they studied the astronomical observations of Ptolemy? Can they translate Ovid's Metamorphoses from Latin?" With each question, Lady Cordelia's face grew paler, while Arabella and Vivian looked increasingly confused. These were not the accomplishments expected of proper young ladies. "I can," Rosalind said quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. "I've read all of those works and more." Prince Adrian's smile was brilliant and genuinely pleased. "Excellent. Then perhaps you would do me the honor of discussing them with me. I find myself in need of intelligent conversation, and I believe you are uniquely qualified to provide it." "Your Grace," Lady Cordelia said desperately, "perhaps we should discuss the terms of any arrangement privately. Rosalind is, after all, under my guardianship." "There are no terms to discuss, madam," Prince Adrian said coolly. "I am not here to negotiate a marriage contract or purchase a bride. I am here to offer Miss Ashford an opportunity that I believe will interest her greatly." "What kind of opportunity?" Rosalind asked, her heart beginning to race with something that might have been hope. "I am in the process of establishing a private library, the most comprehensive collection of rare books and manuscripts in all of Europe. I need someone with the knowledge and passion to help me catalogue and organize this collection, someone who understands the true value of learning and can appreciate the treasures I have gathered." Rosalind felt the world tilt around her. "You're offering me a position? As a librarian?" "As the head librarian and chief scholar of the Dracul collection, the position comes with a generous salary, comfortable living quarters, and access to books that most scholars can only dream of seeing." "This is preposterous," Lady Cordelia sputtered. "Rosalind is a young lady of good family, not some common servant. She cannot possibly—" "She can if she chooses to," Prince Adrian said firmly. "Miss Ashford is of age and free to make her own decisions about her future." "But she's promised to Lord Pemberton," Arabella protested. "The arrangements have already been made." "Have they?" Prince Adrian turned his penetrating gaze on Rosalind. "Miss Ashford, have you given your consent to marry Lord Pemberton?" "No," Rosalind said quickly. "I have not." "Then there are no arrangements to honor." Prince Adrian's voice carried a note of finality that brooked no argument. "Miss Ashford, what is your answer? Will you accept my offer?" Rosalind looked around the room at her stepfamily's horrified faces, then back at the mysterious prince who was offering her everything she had ever dreamed of. It was too good to be true, surely. There had to be a catch, some hidden price she would be expected to pay. "Your Grace," she said carefully, "might I ask why you would offer such a position to someone you've never met? Surely there are more qualified scholars." "There are scholars with more formal credentials, yes, but credentials are not the same as passion, Miss Ashford. I need someone who loves books not for the prestige they bring, but for the knowledge they contain. Someone who sees learning as a joy rather than a burden. And you believe I am such a person?" "I know you are." Your reputation precedes you, my dear. Mr. Whitmore speaks very highly of your intellectual curiosity and your genuine love of learning. Rosalind's eyes widened. You know Mr. Whitmore. We are old friends. He wrote to me about a remarkable young woman who had been denied access to her father's library, but continued to seek knowledge wherever she could find it. He thought you might be interested in a position that would allow you to pursue your scholarly interests without interference. The pieces began to fall into place. Mr. Whitmore had arranged this, had somehow contacted this mysterious prince, and told him about her situation. It was like something out of a fairy tale. The scholar's daughter rescued by a prince who valued her mind above all else. Rosalind began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the choice before her. Take your time, Prince Adrian said gently. This is not a decision to be made lightly, but I should mention that I would need an answer soon. I plan to return to my estate tomorrow evening, and the position needs to be filled as quickly as possible. Tomorrow? Lady Cordelia's voice was shrill with panic. But that's impossible. There are arrangements to be made, contracts to be signed. The only contract that matters is the one between Miss Ashford and myself, Prince Adrian said, and that can be settled quite simply. He reached into his coat and withdrew a leather portfolio from which he extracted several sheets of parchment covered in elegant script. The terms of employment, should you choose to accept them. Rosalind took the documents with trembling hands and began to read. The salary offered was more than generous, it was princely. The living arrangements included a private suite of rooms in the prince's castle, with full access to the library and grounds. Her duties would involve cataloguing, research, and scholarly correspondence. There were provisions for continuing education, travel to other libraries and universities, and even the possibility of publishing her own research. It was everything she had ever wanted, and more than she had ever dared to hope for. This is incredibly generous, Your Grace, she said softly. Knowledge should be rewarded, Miss Ashford. Too often, society undervalues learning in favor of more superficial accomplishments. I prefer to invest in minds rather than appearances. Your Grace, Lady Cordelia said, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. Surely you understand that Rosalind is not equipped for such a position. She has no experience in managing a household, no training in proper etiquette. She will not be managing a household, madam. She will be managing a library. And as for etiquette, I find that genuine intelligence and courtesy are worth far more than artificial manners. Rosalind looked up from the contract to find Prince Adrian watching her with an expression of patient expectation. There was something in his silver eyes that made her feel as though he could see straight into her heart, could understand her desperate hunger for knowledge and freedom. Miss Ashford, he said quietly, what does your heart tell you? My heart tells me that this is the answer to every prayer I've ever made, she replied honestly. But my mind tells me that it's too good to be true. Why would someone like you care about someone like me? Because someone like you is exactly what someone like me has been searching for. Prince Adrian's smile was warm and genuine. Miss Ashford, I have spent centuries. He paused, as if catching himself in an error. That is, I have spent years searching for someone who shares my passion for learning, someone who understands that books are not mere objects, but gateways to infinite worlds of knowledge and wonder. Centuries, Rosalind repeated, her scholar's mind catching the slip. A figure of speech, Prince Adrian said smoothly, but she caught a flicker of something in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or concern. Your Grace, Lady Cordelia interjected desperately, I really must insist that we discuss this matter privately. Rosalind is young and impressionable, and I fear she may not fully understand the implications. The implications are quite clear, Rosalind said, finding her voice and her courage at the same time. Your Grace is offering me the chance to do what I love most in the world, to work with books and manuscripts that I could never hope to see otherwise, and to be valued for my mind rather than dismissed because of it. Exactly, Prince Adrian said approvingly. But there must be more to it than that, Rosalind continued, her analytical mind working through the puzzle. You could hire any number of qualified scholars from Oxford or Cambridge. Why seek out an untrained woman from the countryside? Prince Adrian was quiet for a moment, and Rosalind had the impression that he was weighing his words very carefully. Because, Miss Ashford, the collection I am building is unique. It contains works that conventional scholars might find challenging to accept. I need someone with an open mind, someone who can approach unusual texts without preconceived notions about what is possible or impossible. What kind of texts? Ancient manuscripts dealing with subjects that modern science considers mythical, historical accounts that contradict accepted timelines, philosophical treatises that explore concepts beyond the realm of ordinary human experience. Rosalind felt a thrill of excitement run through her. You're talking about occult manuscripts, texts on alchemy, astrology, supernatural phenomena. Among other things, yes. Does that trouble you? Trouble me? Your Grace, it fascinates me. I've always wondered about the knowledge that was lost when the old libraries were destroyed, the texts that were hidden away because they challenged conventional thinking. Prince Adrian's smile was radiant. Then you understand why I need someone like you, someone who approaches knowledge with curiosity rather than fear, who values truth over comfort. This is madness, Lady Cordelia exclaimed. Rosalind, you cannot seriously be considering this bizarre proposal. What will people say? What will become of your reputation? My reputation as what? Rosalind asked, turning to face her stepmother with newfound confidence. As the unwanted stepdaughter you're trying to marry off to a cruel old man, as the foolish Ignoramus who dares to love learning. I think I prefer to be known as a scholar. You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done for you, you've done nothing for me but try to break my spirit and crush my dreams, Rosalind said firmly. You've called me ignorant and worthless, forbidden me to read, and now you want to sell me to a man who would make my life a misery. Why should I care what you think of my choices? Because I am your guardian. You are my father's widow, nothing more. And I am of age to make my own decisions. Rosalind turned back to Prince Adrian, her heart pounding with excitement and terror in equal measure. Your Grace, I accept your offer. Excellent, Prince Adrian said, his silver eyes warming with approval. I had hoped you would see the wisdom of it. When would you need me to begin? As I mentioned, I return to my estate tomorrow evening. If you are willing, you could accompany me then. That would give you time to pack your belongings and say your farewells. Pack her belongings? Lady Cordelia shrieked. She has no belongings. Everything in this house belongs to me. Then she will travel light, Prince Adrian said calmly. I can provide whatever she needs once we reach Dracul Castle. Dracul Castle, Rosalind repeated, something about the name sending a shiver down her spine. My family's ancestral home. It's quite remote, I'm afraid, but the library is extraordinary. I think you'll find it worth the isolation. I'm sure I will. Rosalind felt as though she were in a dream, as though any moment she might wake up back in her attic room with nothing but her broken heart and her stepfamily's cruelty for company. Then it settled. Prince Adrian bowed formally. Miss Ashford, I look forward to working with you. Lady Blackthorne, thank you for your hospitality. The dismissal was polite but final, and Lady Cordelia had no choice but to accept it with what grace she could muster. As Prince Adrian prepared to leave, he turned back to Rosalind one last time. Miss Ashford, I should mention that my household keeps rather unusual hours. We tend to be most active during the evening and night hours. I hope that won't be a problem. Not at all, Your Grace. I've always been something of a night owl myself. Perfect until tomorrow evening, then. As the prince's carriage disappeared down the drive, Rosalind stood in the doorway, feeling as though her entire world had shifted on its axis. In the space of an hour, she had gone from facing a forced marriage to a cruel man, to accepting a position that would allow her to pursue her greatest passion. "Hey, you stupid, stupid girl," Lady Cordelia hissed behind her. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? You've thrown away your only chance at a respectable marriage for some ridiculous fantasy about books and learning." "I've chosen my own path," Rosalind replied, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "For the first time in my life, I've made a choice based on what I want rather than what others expect of me. And what happens when this prince grows tired of your peculiar ways? What happens when he realizes that you're nothing but a plain, bookish girl with no real accomplishments? You'll be cast out with nowhere to go and no one to take you in." Then I'll face that when it happens, Rosalind said. But at least I'll have had the chance to live my dreams, even if only for a little while. That night, as Rosalind packed her few belongings into a small traveling bag, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror that made it impossible to sleep. She was leaving everything she had ever known to go with a mysterious prince to a remote castle, all for the promise of access to rare books and manuscripts. It was either the most wonderful opportunity of her life or the most dangerous mistake she had ever made. But as she tucked the small volume of Shakespeare's sonnets that Mrs. Hartwell had given her into her bag, Rosalind realized that she didn't care about the danger. For 19 years, she had been told that her love of learning was worthless, that her intelligence was a flaw to be hidden rather than a gift to be celebrated. Tomorrow, she would begin a new life where her mind was valued, where her passion for knowledge was seen as an asset rather than a liability. Whatever the cost, whatever the risks, it had to be better than the slow death of spirit she had been facing at Thornfield Manor. As dawn broke over the countryside, Rosalind stood at her window and watched the sun rise on what would be her last day as an unwanted stepdaughter. Tomorrow evening, she would become something entirely new. A scholar, a librarian, a woman whose worth was measured by her mind rather than her marriage prospects. The thought filled her with a joy so intense it was almost painful. For the first time in years, she had something to look forward to, something to hope for. She had no idea that she was about to enter a world where the impossible was commonplace, where ancient secrets were hidden in dusty tomes, and where the mysterious prince who had rescued her harbored secrets that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the nature of reality itself. But she would learn soon enough. And when she did, her love of knowledge would prove to be not just her salvation, but the key to unlocking mysteries that had been hidden for centuries. The vampire prince had found his scholar, and together they would build a library that would become the stuff of legend. The journey to Dracul Castle took place entirely in darkness, the prince's elegant carriage rolling through the night with an otherworldly smoothness that defied the rough country roads. Rosalind sat across from Prince Adrian, acutely aware of his presence in the confined space, trying to make sense of the man who had so dramatically altered the course of her life. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, cultured, intelligent, and possessed of a quiet authority that seemed to command respect without effort. But there was something else about him, something that made her scholarly mind itch with unanswered questions. The way he moved with perfect grace despite the carriage's motion, the way his pale skin seemed to glow in the lamplight, the way his silver eyes reflected light like a cat's. "Tell me about your collection, Your Grace," she said, partly to break the comfortable silence and partly because she was genuinely curious. "What makes it so unique?" Prince Adrian smiled, and in the dim light of the carriage lamps, his teeth seemed unusually sharp. "It is the accumulation of several lifetimes of collecting, Miss Ashford, books and manuscripts that most scholars believe to be lost forever, texts that chronicle the hidden history of our world. Hidden history. The history that doesn't make it into conventional textbooks. The accounts of events that challenge our understanding of what is possible, the records kept by those who lived through times when the boundaries between the natural and supernatural were more fluid." Rosalind leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. "You speak as if you believe in such things, magic, supernatural phenomena, don't you?" Prince Adrian's silver eyes seemed to pierce straight through to her soul. "Haven't you ever read something that made you wonder if there might be more to this world than what we can see and touch and measure?" Yes, Rosalind admitted. "There have been texts, accounts of things that seem impossible but are recorded by multiple sources, described in such detail that it's hard to dismiss them as mere fantasy." "Exactly. My collection focuses on preserving those accounts, on gathering the evidence that conventional scholarship prefers to ignore." Prince Adrian's voice grew passionate, and Rosalind could see the scholar's fire burning in his eyes. "There is so much knowledge that has been lost or suppressed because it doesn't fit with accepted beliefs about the nature of reality. And you think I can help you organize and study these texts? I think you have exactly the kind of mind needed for such work, open, analytical, unafraid of challenging conventional wisdom." Prince Adrian leaned back in his seat, studying her with those penetrating silver eyes. "Tell me, Miss Ashford, what do you know about vampires?" The question was so unexpected that Rosalind nearly laughed. "Vampires? They're creatures of folklore, aren't they? Undead beings that feed on blood and can only be killed by wooden stakes or sunlight. And what if I told you that such creatures actually exist?" "I would say that you're testing my willingness to consider unconventional ideas," Rosalind replied carefully. "Though I suppose if one were to approach the question scientifically, one would have to examine the evidence rather than dismissing the possibility out of hand." "A very diplomatic answer. And what evidence would you require?" "Historical accounts from reliable sources, physical evidence, perhaps even direct observation under controlled conditions." Rosalind was warming to the intellectual exercise, though I imagine that if such creatures did exist, they would be quite skilled at avoiding detection. "Indeed they would." Prince Adrian's smile was enigmatic. "And what would you think of a vampire who chose to use his extended lifespan to preserve knowledge rather than to prey upon humans?" "I would think such a being would be quite remarkable, to have centuries of time to study and learn, to accumulate wisdom and understanding. It would be an incredible opportunity for intellectual growth. Even if that being had to feed on blood to survive." Rosalind considered the question seriously. "I suppose it would depend on how they obtained that blood. If they harmed innocents, then their scholarly pursuits would be tainted by evil. But if they found ways to feed without causing harm, well, we all have needs that must be met to survive." Prince Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and Rosalind had the impression that her answer had surprised him somehow. "You have a remarkably open mind, Miss Ashford," he said finally. "I've learned that the world is far stranger and more wonderful than most people want to admit," Rosalind replied. "My father taught me to question everything, to seek truth wherever it might lead, even if it challenges comfortable assumptions." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. He always said that knowledge was the greatest treasure anyone could possess because it was the one thing that could never be stolen or destroyed. He was right about that." Prince Adrian's voice carried a note of sadness that made Rosalind wonder what losses he had suffered in his own life. The carriage began to slow, and Prince Adrian looked out the window with obvious satisfaction. "We're here," he announced. Rosalind pressed her face to the glass and gasped at what she saw. Dracul Castle rose from the mountainside like something out of a Gothic novel, all soaring towers and flying buttresses silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Lights flickered in dozens of windows, giving the ancient structure a warm, welcoming glow that contrasted with its intimidating architecture. "It's magnificent," she breathed. "It's home," Prince Adrian said simply, "and now I hope it will be yours as well." As the carriage rolled through the massive gates and into a courtyard lit by torches, Rosalind felt as though she were entering another world entirely. Servants appeared to take her luggage and escort her inside, all of them moving with the same fluid grace she had noticed in Prince Adrian. The interior of the castle was even more impressive than the exterior. The great hall soared 3 stories high, its walls lined with tapestries and paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. A fire crackled in a fireplace large enough to roast an entire ox, and the air was filled with the scent of old wood and parchment, and something else, something wild and mysterious that made her pulse quicken. "Welcome to Dracul Castle, Miss Ashford," Prince Adrian said, offering her his arm. "Shall I show you to your quarters first, or would you prefer to see the library?" "The library, please," Rosalind said without hesitation. "I'm far too excited to think about sleep." Prince Adrian's smile was brilliant. "I was hoping you'd say that." He led her through a maze of corridors lined with more artwork and artifacts than she could take in, past rooms filled with furniture that looked like it had been crafted by master artisans centuries ago. Finally, they stopped before a pair of massive oak doors carved with intricate designs that seemed to shift and move in the flickering torchlight. "Miss Ashford," Prince Adrian said formally, "allow me to present the Dracul collection." He pushed open the doors, and Rosalind stepped into paradise. The library was beyond anything she could have imagined. It was enormous, easily the size of a cathedral, with shelves stretching up 3 full stories and connected by elegant spiral staircases and narrow walkways. Thousands upon thousands of books lined the walls, their leather bindings gleaming in the light of countless candles and oil lamps. The air was thick with the intoxicating scent of old parchment and leather and ink. But it was more than just the size of the collection that took her breath away. As she moved deeper into the library, she began to notice details that made her scholarly heart race with excitement. Ancient scrolls in languages she couldn't identify. Illuminated manuscripts with artwork so detailed and beautiful, it brought tears to her eyes. Books bound in materials she had never seen before, some of which seemed to glow with their own inner light. "This is incredible," she whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might somehow break the spell. "How long did it take you to gather all of this?" "Centuries," Prince Adrian said, and this time he didn't correct himself. "I've been collecting these works for over 500 years, seeking out texts that others considered too dangerous or too impossible to preserve." Rosalind turned to stare at him, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. 500 years. Yes, Miss Ashford. I am what you would call a vampire, though I prefer to think of myself as a scholar who happens to be immortal. The revelation should have terrified her. She should have run screaming from the library, should have demanded to be taken home immediately. Instead, Rosalind found herself studying Prince Adrian with the same analytical curiosity she brought to any new piece of knowledge. "That explains so much," she said quietly. "The way you move, your pale skin, those unusual eyes, the fact that you keep nocturnal hours and speak of things as if you've witnessed them personally." "You're not afraid?" Prince Adrian asked, and she could hear genuine surprise in his voice. "Should I be? You've shown me nothing but kindness and respect. You've offered me the opportunity of a lifetime, and you've been completely honest about your nature when you could have continued to deceive me." Rosalind moved closer to one of the shelves, running her fingers along the ancient spines. "Besides, if you meant me harm, you could have done it long before now. Most humans would be terrified. Most humans haven't spent their lives reading about the impossible and dreaming of worlds beyond the ordinary." Rosalind pulled a volume from the shelf, a medieval manuscript on astronomical observations, and opened it carefully. "This is a first-hand account of the comet that appeared in 1456, isn't it? Written by someone who actually observed it?" "Yes, a monk named Brother Thomas, who kept detailed records of celestial events." Prince Adrian moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from his skin. He was one of the few scholars of his time who understood that comets followed predictable paths rather than being omens of doom. "And you knew him personally?" "I did. He was a remarkable man, curious, intelligent, unafraid to challenge the accepted wisdom of his time, rather like someone else I know." Rosalind felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. "You flatter me, Your Grace. I speak only the truth. And please call me Adrian. If we're to work together, formality seems unnecessary." "Adrian," Rosalind repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "It suits you better than Your Grace." "I'm glad you think so." Adrian gestured toward the vast collection surrounding them. "So, Miss Ashford, Rosalind, what do you think of your new workplace?" "I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Rosalind said honestly. "I could spend a lifetime here and never finish exploring everything you've gathered." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, because as it happens, I have a lifetime to offer you." Rosalind looked up at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean that this collection needs more than just a temporary caretaker. It needs someone who can truly understand its value, someone who can help me continue to build and preserve it for future generations." Adrian's silver eyes were intense with emotion. "I'm offering you more than just a position, Rosalind. I'm offering you a partnership that could last for centuries. You're talking about turning me into a vampire. I'm talking about giving you the gift of time. Time to read every book in this collection. Time to travel the world in search of new texts. Time to become the greatest scholar who has ever lived." Adrian's voice grew passionate. "Think of what you could accomplish with centuries at your disposal. Think of the knowledge you could gather, the mysteries you could solve." The offer was staggering, almost beyond comprehension. To live for centuries, to have unlimited time to pursue her love of learning, to work alongside someone who shared her passion for knowledge. It was everything she had ever dreamed of and more. But it was also terrifying. To give up her humanity, to become something other than what she was, to live forever while everyone she had ever known aged and died. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course you do. It's not a decision to be made lightly. Adrian's expression was understanding. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, you have a library to explore and a collection to catalogue. I think you'll find that the work itself will help you decide what you truly want. Over the following weeks, Rosalind threw herself into her work with a passion that surprised even her. Each day brought new discoveries. Manuscripts she had thought lost forever. Texts that challenged everything she thought she knew about history and science and the nature of reality itself. She catalogued books on alchemy that contained formulas for transmuting base metals into gold, complete with detailed instructions and chemical diagrams. She found historical accounts of battles that had been won through supernatural intervention, written by generals who had witnessed impossible things. She discovered philosophical treatises that explored the nature of immortality, the soul, and the boundaries between life and death. And through it all, Adrian was her constant companion and guide. He shared stories of the authors he had known personally, provided context for events he had witnessed firsthand, and helped her understand the significance of texts that would have been incomprehensible to any ordinary scholar. This account of the Black Death, Rosalind said one evening, looking up from a leather-bound journal she had been translating from medieval Latin. It describes the plague as being spread by creatures that sound remarkably like vampires. Because it was, Adrian said matter-of-factly, not looking up from his own reading, a group of rogue vampires decided to use the chaos of the plague years to feed indiscriminately. They created new vampires without teaching them control, and those fledglings spread death and disease wherever they went. And you know this because I was part of the group that stopped them. Adrian's voice was grim. It took nearly a decade to hunt down all the rogues and their progeny. By then, a third of Europe's population was dead. Rosalind stared at him in amazement. You helped save Europe from a supernatural plague. I helped clean up a mess that my own kind had created. It was the least I could do. But that means you've been fighting to protect humans for centuries. I've been fighting to protect the balance between our worlds. Vampires who prey indiscriminately on humans inevitably draw attention that threatens all of us. Better to stop them before they can cause widespread damage. You're not what I expected a vampire to be, Rosalind said softly. And what did you expect? A monster, a creature driven only by bloodlust and the desire for power. Rosalind set down the journal and looked at him directly. Instead, I find a scholar who has dedicated his immortal life to preserving knowledge and protecting innocence. I'm still a predator, Rosalind. I still need blood to survive, and I still possess the capacity for violence that all vampires carry. But you choose how to use those abilities. You choose to be something more than just a monster. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes reflecting the candlelight. You see me more clearly than I see myself sometimes. I see you as you truly are, a man who was given a terrible gift and chose to use it for something beautiful. Is that what you think vampirism is? A gift? Rosalind considered the question carefully. I think it's what you make of it. Like any form of power, it can be used for good or evil. You've chosen to use it to preserve knowledge and protect others. That makes it a gift, at least in your hands. And in yours, if you chose to accept my offer, what would you make of immortality? I would make it into the greatest scholarly adventure in history, Rosalind said without hesitation. I would use it to learn everything there is to know about this world, and perhaps others. I would help you build this collection into something that could benefit all of humanity, even though it would mean giving up your human life, your chance for a normal marriage and family. What normal marriage could I have? My stepfamily wanted to sell me to a cruel old man who would have crushed my spirit and destroyed my love of learning. And as for family, Rosalind gestured around the library. I think I've found my family here, among these books and with someone who understands what they mean to me. Adrian's expression grew intense. Rosalind, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I've made my decision. Rosalind stood and moved to where he sat, her heart pounding with excitement and terror and absolute certainty. I want to accept your offer. I want to become your partner in every sense of the word. I want to spend eternity learning and growing and building something beautiful together." Adrian rose to meet her, his hands coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. "Are you certain? Once it's done, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Then yes," Adrian said softly, his silver eyes blazing with joy and love and promise. "Yes, my brilliant, beautiful scholar, let me show you what forever looks like." The transformation itself was unlike anything Rosalind could have imagined. Adrian's bite was not painful, but rather intensely pleasurable, sending waves of sensation through her entire body. As her human blood flowed out, she felt herself becoming something new, something more than she had been before. When it was over, she opened eyes that now saw the world with supernatural clarity. Colors were more vivid, sounds more distinct, and the very air seemed to shimmer with energy she had never noticed before. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked, his voice filled with concern and hope. "Alive," Rosalind said wonderingly. "More alive than I've ever felt before." She looked around the library with her new vision and gasped. "The books, I can see the magic in them. Some of them are actually glowing. Those are the texts that contain real power, real knowledge of the supernatural world. Your vampire senses allow you to perceive what human eyes cannot. It's incredible." Rosalind moved to one of the glowing books and opened it carefully. The text seemed to leap off the page, its meaning crystal clear despite being written in a language she had never seen before. "I can understand this. How is that possible?" Vampirism enhances many abilities, including the capacity for learning and understanding. You'll find that languages come much more easily now, that patterns and connections you couldn't see before become obvious. Then I really could become the greatest scholar in history. "We could become the greatest scholarly partnership in history," Adrian corrected, pulling her into his arms, "if you'll have me as your partner in all things." "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to be my companion for eternity, to share this immortal life with me, to help me build something that will outlast empires and preserve knowledge for future generations." Adrian's voice grew tender. "I'm asking you to let me love you for as long as the stars shine in the sky." "Yes," Rosalind said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it. Yes to forever." Their kiss was everything she had dreamed of and more, passionate and tender and full of promise for the centuries to come. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless with emotion. "I have something for you," Adrian said, leading her to a section of the library she had never seen before. "A wedding gift, you might say." He opened a hidden door behind one of the bookcases, revealing a smaller room that took Rosalind's breath away. It was filled entirely with books written by women, scholars, poets, philosophers, scientists, whose works had been lost or suppressed because of their gender. "I've been collecting these for centuries," Adrian explained, "preserving the voices of brilliant women whose contributions were ignored or destroyed by a world that didn't value their minds. I thought you might like to help me continue that work." Rosalind felt tears, vampire tears that sparkled like diamonds, flow down her cheeks. "It's perfect. It's the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. You deserve to see your intellectual sisters honored and remembered. You deserve to know that you're part of a long tradition of women who refuse to let society silence their voices. And now we can make sure their voices are never silenced again. Now we can build a library that celebrates knowledge in all its forms, that preserves wisdom regardless of who created it." Adrian pulled her close again. "We can create something that will be a beacon of learning for centuries to come." Epilogo. 100 years later, Professor Rosalind Dracul stood before a gathering of the world's most distinguished scholars, her vampire-enhanced beauty unchanged by the passage of a century. The great hall of Dracul Castle had been converted into a lecture theatre for the occasion, filled with academics who had traveled from around the globe to attend the first international conference on supernatural studies. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying easily through the vast space, "welcome to what I believe will be a new era in scholarly research. For too long, we have allowed artificial boundaries to limit our pursuit of knowledge. Today, we begin to tear down those boundaries." In the front row, Adrian watched his wife with undisguised pride and adoration. Over the past century, they had built the Dracul collection into the most comprehensive library of supernatural and occult knowledge in the world. More importantly, they had created a network of scholars, both human and supernatural, who were dedicated to preserving and sharing knowledge without prejudice or fear. The texts we will be examining over the next week, Rosalind continued, represent the culmination of centuries of research into phenomena that conventional science has long dismissed as impossible. But as we have learned, the impossible is often simply the not yet understood. The audience, a mixture of human academics and supernatural beings who had chosen to reveal themselves for this historic gathering, listened with rapt attention as Rosalind outlined their agenda. They would be studying everything from vampire physiology to werewolf pack dynamics, from witch magic to ancient prophecies that had proven remarkably accurate. Knowledge, Rosalind said, echoing words her father had spoken to her more than a century ago, is the one treasure that grows when shared. It is our responsibility as scholars to ensure that no voice is silenced, no discovery is lost, no truth is suppressed, simply because it challenges our preconceptions. As the conference participants dispersed to begin their research, Adrian joined his wife on the stage. "Magnificent as always," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Your father would be so proud of what you've accomplished." "What we've accomplished," Rosalind corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you. I provided the books. You provided the vision to make them meaningful." They walked together through the library that had become their life's work, past shelves that now held not just ancient texts, but also modern research, scientific papers that bridged the gap between the natural and supernatural worlds. The collection had grown beyond anything either of them had originally envisioned, becoming a true center of learning that attracted the greatest minds of every generation. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked, as they paused before the section dedicated to women scholars. "Giving up your human life for this?" "Never," Rosalind said firmly. "How could I regret a choice that led to all of this? How could I regret finding love and purpose and the chance to make a real difference in the world, even though it meant leaving behind the possibility of a normal life? Adrian, my love, what we have is so much better than normal. We have forever to learn and grow and discover new wonders. We have a partnership that has lasted a century and will last for centuries more. We have built something that will outlive empires and preserve knowledge for future generations. We have indeed." Adrian pulled her close, marveling as he did every day at how perfectly she fit in his arms. "And we're just getting started." "What do you mean?" "I mean that there are still worlds to explore, mysteries to solve, knowledge to preserve. I've been thinking about establishing satellite libraries in other countries, creating a global network of supernatural scholarship." "That's a wonderful idea. We could start with the Americas. I've heard there are indigenous traditions there that contain remarkable wisdom about the spirit world." "Exactly. And perhaps we could finally tackle that collection of Asian manuscripts we acquired last year. Your facility with languages has improved remarkably." Rosalind laughed, the sound like silver bells in the vast library. "One of the many advantages of vampirism, though I must admit I'm still struggling with that ancient Sumerian text about the origins of magic. We'll figure it out together. We have all the time in the world." As they stood surrounded by the fruits of their century-long labor, Rosalind reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as an unwanted stepdaughter, dismissed as a foolish ignoramus by people who couldn't see past their own prejudices. She had become one of the most respected scholars in the world, vampire or human. But more than that, she had found love. Not just romantic love, though her marriage to Adrian was everything she could have dreamed of, but love for learning, for discovery, for the endless adventure of expanding human knowledge. "Adrian," she said softly. "Yes, my love. Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing my worth when no one else could. For building me a library of love. For showing me that the greatest treasures aren't gold or jewels, but knowledge and understanding, and the chance to make the world a little bit brighter. Thank you for accepting my offer. Thank you for choosing to spend eternity with a creature who needed to learn how to love again. Adrian's silver eyes were warm with emotion. "Thank you for proving that the most beautiful transformations happen not when we change what we are, but when we become who we were always meant to be." And who was I meant to be? The greatest scholar who ever lived, my partner in all things, the woman who turned a vampire's collection of books into a beacon of hope for all who hunger for knowledge. As night fell over Dracul Castle, the vampire prince and his scholar bride walked hand in hand through their library of love, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of centuries and the promise of centuries yet to come. Outside, the world continued to change and grow, but here in their sanctuary of learning, time moved at the pace of discovery. And love was measured not in years, but in the endless joy of minds meeting across the pages of a book. They had built something beautiful together, not just a library, but a legacy that would inspire scholars for generations to come. And they had proven that sometimes the greatest love stories are written not in poetry or song, but in the careful preservation of knowledge and the patient nurturing of minds that hunger to learn. In the end, Lady Cordelia had been wrong about everything. Rosalind was not a foolish ignoramus. She was a brilliant scholar whose love of learning had led her to immortality, and a love that would last forever. And the vampire prince who had rescued her from a life of intellectual starvation had gained not just a librarian, but a partner whose passion for knowledge matched his own. Together, they had built a library of love that would stand as long as there were minds curious enough to seek out its treasures. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the castle slept and the books whispered their secrets to the shadows, they continued their eternal dance of discovery, two souls united by their shared belief that knowledge was indeed the greatest treasure of all. What an absolutely breathtaking journey of intellectual awakening and eternal love. From that heartbreaking opening, where Rosalind's stepmother destroyed her beloved book and called her a foolish ignoramus, to that magnificent library reveal where Adrian showed her centuries of preserved knowledge, to their beautiful transformation into immortal scholarly partners. Every moment had me completely captivated. The way Adrian saw Rosalind's brilliant mind as her greatest treasure, when everyone else saw it as a flaw, just melted my heart completely. And watching her go from being forbidden to read to becoming one of the greatest scholars in supernatural history. Pure perfection. That moment when she realized she could understand ancient texts with her vampire abilities gave me absolute chills. I'm still getting emotional thinking about how Adrian spent centuries collecting books written by women whose voices had been silenced, then gifted that entire collection to Rosalind as a wedding present. The symbolism of building a library of love, where knowledge and passion intertwined, was just chef's kiss perfect. Which moment hit you hardest? Was it when Adrian first offered her the position and saw her true worth? When she chose immortality to spend eternity learning alongside him? Or that gorgeous epilogue where they're hosting international supernatural conferences and changing the world through scholarship? If this story of intellectual liberation, vampire romance, and love that celebrates the mind moved your soul, smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Your support helps me bring you more tales where love conquers ignorance and knowledge becomes the greatest treasure. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think you could have made Rosalind's choice to become immortal for the sake of eternal learning? And what did you think of the way Adrian collected and preserved knowledge that conventional scholars dismissed? Plus, I'm dying to know which library moment gave you the most goosebumps. Next week, I'm bringing you another mind-bending supernatural romance. She was born cursed to bring death, until the Demon King taught her to bring life instead. Get ready for dark magic, forbidden love, and a heroine who discovers that sometimes our greatest curses can become our most powerful gifts. Until then, remember that the most beautiful love stories are built not just on passion, but on the shared joy of two minds discovering the infinite wonders of knowledge together.